Hello to my colleagues in Croatia. I'm very glad to join you with this pre-recording. And I'm Michael Fullan, a professor of education at University of Toronto. And I'll say a little bit about our group that's doing the change work with school systems around the world. And then I want to share about 20 slides with you. You'll have them. So that's good. I work with about 12 people. We're mostly practitioners. That is, we work very close to school systems in California, in Australia, across Canada, Uruguay, and Latin America, several places. And we are mainly learning about practice from doing practice. So, practice is typically a fairly sizable unit. Let's say it's a set of schools that are in a municipality that are tied in with a province or a state policy, and that the so they we want to look at system change, not just small innovations, but system change. The second thing we do is, and I'll show you the slides. We have decided that the normal way you would do it is okay. Start. What's the policy? Let's implement it. You follow it down into practice. We're finding that it's better to think about the whole picture, but then you'll see the slide in a few minutes, we have a bottom-up approach. What's happening at the school and community level? How does it link to municipality or the district? And then what's the policy context for the country or the state, whatever that's in? And so we have been for the last 20 years, especially since the turn of the century, getting more specific about system change. And we have an interesting conclusion. When we first started this, we had the normal what's the policy? So the top, what are the districts and schools to implement it, the middle, and then the local school and community. Now, because of the findings we've had, I've turned that system on its head and say we have to build the bottom, strengthen the middle, which is the municipality. And the word I use in English is intrigue the top, which really means that you want to have the strength to relate to the top, specifically to bring about these changes. So a lot of experience, a lot of development. I've just finished another book. I'll just mention it now. It's in my series of the New Meaning of Educational Change. It's the sixth edition, so New Meaning of Educational Change number 6, and it is being able to represent the change in action and then to improve this more because it is all fed by the ideas about how people are experiencing change. So let me take you through that. You'll be able to look at these slides yourselves when you get going. First on Zagreb, I'm very happy to be associated with you for this, for professional learning communities, although it's more fundamental to system change, with the Department of Pedagogy at the university, and with the group of, I'm going to start with school principals today. By that, I also mean, as you'll see, teachers, students, community, parents, and then, but then it branches out into the fuller system. So let me then explain how we go. I want to start with, in one sense, with artificial intelligence. It's very tricky. We are working with this very much directly. And our general attitude of the team is big tech or technology, especially AI, is here to stay. So we can't avoid it, but we should be careful about what I've called the big tech. So the big Google or Microsoft or whatever, because there's a lot of ways of which that is not accessible to us. So we see that as the umbrella, the big technology. And then within that, we want to build up the capacity of teachers and students and school leaders to use technology to implement the good things that they want to implement. So at the big tech side, we can see on this guideline here that I've put out here, security of data is a big thing. Prepare people for the future. That's what it's supposed to do. But we are also cautious about big tech. So the big macro tech, one of the reasons we're cautious is because big tech actually doesn't there aren't many controls on it. It's got a mind of its own, so to speak. And the founders of big tech, Professor Jeff Hinton, who's at University of Toronto, he just won the Nobel Prize in physics for helping to develop the large language model and recognized his that. He said, now that I've developed it, I worry about it. I am an informed skeptic, he said. I know about it because I created it, but I'm worried about its use. So I take that as pretty serious warning. He built it and he's worried about it. In our work, my team, Max Drummy, who's helping, he's our technology person. He and I and others are working on this, and we see us challenging the status quo. We need changes in the school system. I'll name those changes as we go through, and that it's very important that we have a degree of control over this. And we have built up this support for schools and teams. Our districts who are advanced in this have done that. And they all say, we're learning as we go along. We are developing this use. We have control over it. We assess it. We build it stronger and stronger. So as we said, that you can't, the status quo or the existing system isn't working. So you need this kind of power of AI. And we are, you'll hear me talk about that. Max Drummy and I are building with a technology company now a focus on technology that has, we call it proximity to practice. So it's very close to improving learning, and it's focusing on teaching and learning. So it's in control of the students, and teachers are in control. So there's a lot of close to action work in here. If I comment on what's wrong with the system, here's a diagram. It's negative, if you like, because it says the research is pretty clear in all the countries that there's a tendency for teachers to be on their own too much, isolation, to be too individualistic, not collaborative enough, to where the student is too passive, not active in their own learning, where there's not enough time to do work together, where there's a lot of isolation of schools from each other, so they're not learning from each other. There's system demands, but because the system isn't organized, it's hard to respond to those. So those, I have to say, because I've just done that research review of the last 60 years, that the system isn't working, by and large, nowhere. And so we have to really realize there's something wrong and start to change it. Here's our kind of 8 factors of change that we're putting into a kind of a grouping to interact, 8 interacting factors. You'll see that number 8 is artificial intelligence. I'm going to say that accurately, that's the one we know the least about. It's the newest. It's not predictable. It has to be watched. You have to learn the skills of having to develop that. But one way to describe it is you want to use it in order to improve the other 7. So just think of these 7 as dynamic. And they all make very strong sense, but they're not as strong as they should be. The purpose of meaning of education, not very clear these days. The sense of belonging that students and teachers and others have about being part of a group doing something worthwhile, not very clear. The time available to work on things is too much used by things that are time consuming and don't have an impact. Sense of autonomy and by autonomy we mean we use the word connected autonomy. Connected autonomy is I'm autonomous. I have my own freedom to a certain extent, but I'm connected to other teachers. I'm connected to school leadership. I'm connected to the community. So it is very much a collaborative solution. It has to be. We've said about leadership, build this in. Good leaders help the group become collaborative and focused. Let me say that again. Good leaders help the group, whether it's school or community or bigger, help the group become more collaborative and more focused on the things that really count. It is students and teachers working together. It is mobilizing the relationship to the community and then thinking outward at the bigger district. So I still want to ground it at this lower level. The title of this talk, as you know, is on the role of the school principal. And there's a long way in which I could have to describe it, but it's going to take too much time. So let me refer you to the second book I did in the principal. It's called, you see it on the screen, The Principal 2.0, 2023 it came out. And it looks at, it says the role of the principal is to develop the group of teachers and students and community, develop the local system. So if I take that next diagram, the left one there, the internal system is the local system. And the goal is not to implement policy coming from the top. This is my conclusion. The goal is that the principal becomes more skilled at enabling collaborative work among teachers and students to develop the success that's necessary. And we have case studies in that Principle 2.0 book that describes what they are. That book is now translated into, well, it's 4 languages: English, Dutch, it's in Spanish. I think it's also in Portuguese. So it's available on French as well, not in Croatian as far as I know, but nonetheless, it's very much then. And this is the thing I would like you to remember, that the goal of the school principal, and this is maybe not the goal that they have been developed in, is increasingly in our success to be part of enabling the collaboration between teachers and students, linking into the community, learning from that, connecting to other schools where you can learn from each other. We have the great connections in Chile, for example, that my researcher Santiago Rincon Gallardo is doing, the two of us, where we have cohorts of school principals in teams within the school, and then teams across the schools, where they're learning how to do what I'm describing in this 25 minutes I have with you. And what they're doing is getting better at having control over the agenda. They are proactive consumers of state policy. So the policy is out there, but instead of thinking in a linear fashion, I'm going to implement state policy in this direction, we say, build your autonomy and interact with state policy and decide what you can best do. There's a lot of things I want to about relationships that I want to highlight, and this one on this it just gives you an idea of the I guess I'll say the subtlety of that. It's not just build relationships. This quote here, and it's coming from a school principal in England, who says that leaders get the system wrong when they first try to look at the goals, but they don't develop the relationships. So just think of goals, relationships, and say the two have to work together. And most people make the mistake. Well, here's the goals. Here it's the new policy. So they focus on the goal and say, we've got to do this. We've got to do this. The real issue is build the relationship between the principal and teacher and teachers, with the students, with the community, relationships, and then focused on the aspirations and the goals. And in doing that, you build trust, you build commitment, you build that ability to keep going. This is what I mentioned about turning the system upside down. You probably have a similar division. I've used 3. So in your case, you would have a school and community. So that's the base. You would have the middle, which might be a group of schools in a municipality or some other organization. And you'd have the policy level. So we have said, think of those 3 levels, but then think about how you can then be influential in building the level upward as well as interaction. And we've just tested this out on some countries, Scotland, for example, where they have 32 districts and the policy level, and they are working at the school community level. They're working at the district, those 32 districts, having some of them learn from each other, and then they're building the relationship to the government. So this is an important way to think of these dynamics of system change. I've said this just a reminder not to stay within the walls of your school all the time. That a lot of ideas can be obtained when you get collaboration not only inside the school but outside with other schools. And sometimes it's a natural group like a school district, which might have 12 schools or 20 schools. So that's possible. But the most important thing is, of the findings, the research findings, is that principals who focus on teaching and learning, which they should with their teachers, but they don't go outside much, do not get the results compared to principals who do the first part, but they also learn from other people in other schools. So there's a collaborative networking across schools and within that. So just think of this idea: going outside in order to get better inside is one source of ideas. In terms of purpose, I don't know what your policy documents say, but I can say it this way: that over the last 50 years, even in the most advanced educational countries like Canada, the US, England, or whatever, that there has been a growing and growing lack of sense of purpose about what is the education system supposed to do. It started off at the beginning, it's supposed to teach literacy and numeracy, the basics. That was all right for a while. But now there are bigger demands, and we have already now changed that, because what we talk to teachers and students and other levels about is what is the purpose of schooling. And I'm going to tell you in a moment, but you can see it on the screen. It's to develop the knowledge and competencies to be effective in a complex society. We have 6 of those competencies that I'll show you in a slide in a few moments, but it's not in the narrow sense just to develop literacy and numeracy. That's too narrow. You have to develop the deeper skills of being effective in a complex society. They include literacy and numeracy, but they must do the other ones I'm going to tell you about. One of the researchers, Jalmetta from Harvard, did a study of deep learning in high schools in the US. And they spent about a year going to a lot of schools that were supposed to be involved in excellent learning. And what they found, and the book is called In Search of Deeper Learning, what they found was that schools, from the point of view of the students, did not really get at the intrinsic interest of the students. Something like 80% of students, by the time they get to year 12, year 11, 80%, 70% of students are not really engaged. And what they said by alternative when they talked to students, look at these 5 things. When they interviewed students about being bored or being alienated, the students said, we want opportunities that have a sense of purpose, improve the community, improve some aspect of the world. We want strong connections with other students and with adults. We want to be viewed as valuable, asset-based, valuable. We want their identities to be recognized and to be something useful. And we want an opportunity to contribute to society. This is all very much the agenda we're talking about now. So I want you to think about it this way. Develop yourself so you'll be a better able to handle complex society. So that's the personal goal. And then secondly, work with others so that in teams you can build a community. Those two feed on each other. And it's very much essential these days where we have so much turmoil, so much ineffectiveness, so much conflict, that the educational system, especially young people, are part and parcel of the solution that we are developing. So here's the summary. Students to become effective in society, wherever they go, the pathways. We're working in districts now where they call it the pathways to where they would fit in society. And secondly, effective for society, that they're doing something with other teachers and students that make a contribution to improve the community, to learn about aspects of the country, whatever. So the competencies, the specific competencies, you can read about these in our books, and my latest book has explicitly these, The New Meaning of Educational Change, 6th edition. And these 6 C's, I'm not going to read them because you'll be able to look at them and translate them once you get them from my PowerPoint. But you'll see that the 6 C's have certain goals that are within the normal curriculum, like critical thinking or collaboration, communication. Even those are not well developed quite often, but they have 2 super goals, I guess I'll say: citizenship and character and compassion. So those overriding things. And we don't do all these 6 at once and say, okay, today's Monday, do them all. We say, where do we start? Joint determination is a big change word for us. Develop it between teachers and students and cross that and start to see it develop. We know now in the cases that are successful, Anaheim Unified High School District, 20 schools, Ottawa School District, something like 100 schools, big. They both are doing these very well, thoroughly, and they don't do it all at once. They build it, but eventually they're interacting with all of the issues. And then when we could continue to go in this, we've had to figure out new ways of measuring the outcomes. And that instead of just the test scores, which doesn't really help you learn, the evidence is pretty clear, we have other measures that are basically performance assessment. We can now assess any of the 6 C's. We can tell you how good you are at collaboration by this assessment. So this is very well developed now. When you get into, and here's where it gets political and tricky, what I call accountability. Most systems have made the mistake, or maybe they thought that was the easiest way out, of making the top in charge of accountability. So they do the test scores, they examine schools that don't do very well. There's kind of a negative atmosphere about assessment. And we know that accountability, just because you're pressured to do something, doesn't mean you're going to do it or you'll be good at doing it. So it has to be more cooperative, more jointly developed. And these are our 5 elements. You'll notice transparency of results, specificity without imposition, trust, internal and external engagement, open display of progress. None of those are, I guess I'll say, the word we use in English would be punitive. None of those are heavy-handed. The guideline here, Richard Elmore from Harvard was the one that developed this earlier. He said no amount of external accountability will be effective in the absence of internal accountability. In other words, you have to develop inside the school the relationship between students, among students, with teachers, administrators, community. You have to develop that ability to examine your progress, not to be too judgmental about it, because that causes people to back off, but to be developmental about it, and then to see it go increasingly more and more. We have lots of examples of this success. It's this fine balance between external transparency and internal development of the skills, and then some developmental improvement, which is usually done by motivating people to put in the energy to get the results. I don't have as much time, excuse me, to examine the leadership skills. We have a toolkit or whatever you want to call it, but I do want to name them. There are 5 skills that leaders, and by leaders we mean anybody who is in that position, teacher leaders, school principals, students sometimes in high school, they're in that leadership. We call, these are the 5, they interact with each other. Spirit work is, we used to call it moral purpose, but it's the higher goals. What are the goals of education in our society? Is it to develop citizens who are good quality contributors to societal development? We think so. That's what we call spirit work. Contextual literacy is the knowledge you have of the situation that's changing, let's say the school and community. It seems obvious to say that, but there are a lot of examples where the leaders are not very knowledgeable about the internal workings of the community. So we call that context, and we call contextual literacy the knowledge and trust you have about the community. Connected autonomy, another thing. We used to say just collaboration. Now we say collaboration is not good if you're just doing it superficially, or if it's just with yourself at the at that level of a few people. You have to have autonomy and collaboration built into the same relationships. We know how to do that. We know how to describe it. We know how to evaluate it. The 4th one is, we call it legacy leadership. That might be too abstract for a lot of people, but what it means is, if you take a given school or a set of schools, that after 5 years, let's say a school principal is the head of that, after 5 years, what we want to see is improvement in the school because of good leadership and good development. But we also want to see that when that person leaves, and everybody leaves eventually, obviously, by definition, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 7, maybe it's 10, but when they leave, we want them to leave behind leaders who can carry on. That's what we mean by legacy leadership. People who work collaboratively with your leader so that they have the leadership and even might have better new ideas to continue with. And then we have this rather tricky word. I'll end with that, systemness. And systemness is not as abstract as it sounds. And I don't know whether this translates so well because it's a very fine distinction. But there's a difference between systemic and systemness. Systemic is understanding that the system is connected in lots of ways. So that's good, that's important to know. But systemic is external to you. For us, systemness is how you think about the system, the relationship between classrooms and the rest of the school and the community and the region. Those systemness things, there's much more of a subjective, emotional identity with I am in the system and I want others in the system to help improve it, and I want to be part of that. So again, we have lots of examples of this now. They're in our books, they're in our videos, but this is the direction we're going. And then, in one sense, we all know that the world is in a mess, but also the educational systems correspondingly are problematic. They were in difficulty before COVID. So 2019, 2020, they're already a problem of lack of purpose. But then COVID came along and everything kind of fell apart. So it aggravated the problem with that the situation was there, and that this means that there is increasingly less and less success, more and more conflict inside and outside the school, more more deterioration of the motivation of students and teachers, just all kinds of problems. And our success has been to take those situations, turn them into a manageable success, and that be able to sustain some of this difficulty. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're writing about in our new books. You'll see that our articles, success examples, but also right now, I'd have to say in 2024, 2025, next month, that things are more broken than fixed, that there's more problems everywhere, and nobody can claim big success. And this means that you can say it's discouraging, but you can also say, if we team up students and teachers and community, parents and leadership together, this is the time to get success when we need it the most. And that's our work, is to really push that and develop it. So system change is making students, teachers, principals, and the community the best allies for each other. That I call the chemistry test, because it's the chemistry of working together. And it means that what we have to do is build that kind of collaboration. We need leadership. And sometimes the school is collaborative, but the bigger system is not. So you have your local problems. I'd be glad if you send me questions after viewing this tape. I'd be glad to answer some questions from the distance afterwards in the new year. And then a couple more. A new driver, we call policies and actions that cause good change, we call them drivers. So a driver is, instead of a driver being general, so a general driver is, we're going to improve literacy in all of our schools. That's not much of a driver, it's too vague. But if we make it proximity to practice, we are going to improve literacy. We are going to improve collaboration. And we know how to do that. We know how to measure it. We know how to show, okay, it is successful. That's what it looks like. It's got to be very specific to practice. That's why we use the term specificity with imposition. When you try to impose things, they don't work. Specificity does work if it's a good idea. And another way of saying the same thing is precision without prescription. And then the technology I've already mentioned. We're now with the technology company, Cadence, using the technology to make everything I've said in the last 20 minutes go faster and deeper. And that's really where we're getting this success. This semi-finally, my second last slide, I want to use the word accountability. Normally it's a bad word. Your accountability is not strong enough. You have to have more imposition. But I want to say again that the best way to get external accountability is to get internal accountability first. Teachers and students and others working together, learning about whether they're successful or not, and then moving outside and interacting. So the internal accountability, external accountability, a two-way street. And then I want to close with this diagram I showed earlier. These are 8 key conditions for the success. When they interact, they form a system. So think of the word systemness as those 8 things interacting. We're doing this now in a lot of different places. It's successful. It's difficult in many ways because it's not just, well, there's 8 things, let's put them in one by one. It's really getting the mindset of this way of getting at change. And then once you have a mindset, it's starting to build the capacity. This is a key word. Build the capacity of the group to be skilled at these individually and to be skilled at making them interact so that you see the productive results come from that. So I think this is, I've given you a quick rundown for this, but you'll be able to see it in some of our work on our website and some of the different books, including the new ones. What I do now is wish you well. It's a Christmas season now. We're taking a bit of a break, but we've got a very big agenda starting about January 3rd. This work now, I'd say in ending, that the most encouraging thing right now, even though most things are discouraging, the overall picture is discouragement. But the light, the kind of the light at the end of the tunnel is the fact that we're working with practitioners. We're figuring out how to do it together, and we're not relying on abstract policy. We're relying on local implementation. That is, learning sideways to other local and learning upwards, and trying to influence the system. So have a very strong Christmas break, and please feel free to send us questions. Send me questions. We'll respond to it. And I wish you every success in 2025. Thank you.